All right, buckle up, everybody. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to tackle a news story that's really kind of set the internet on fire. We're talking about a single social media post, and just the explosive reactions it triggered.
Wow.
A real-time look at how, a very specific moment can reveal so much about, us, about where we are as a society. You might be thinking, it's just one post. How deep can we really go?
Yeah.
But trust me, this deep dive is going to take us through immigration.
Oh, yeah.
Political rhetoric, how social media can amplify even the most extreme viewpoints.
Yeah, it's fascinating, how this one story acts as a sort of lens, focusing our attention on the broader trends and tensions simmering beneath the surface of our society.
Exactly, yeah. So the story centers around Valentina Gomez. She's a Republican candidate for US Congress in Texas.
Oh.
Now, Gomez has taken a very hardline stance on illegal immigration, going so far as to call for public executions for those who commit violent crimes against Americans.
Oh, wow. It's the kind of statement that makes you stop scrolling, just makes you stop and think, whoa. It's intentionally provocative, designed to shock and grab attention, and it taps into something primal, our deeply ingrained fear of crime and the desire for swift, even brutal justice.
It's definitely gotten people talking. The comments under her post run the gamut, from full-throated support to outright horror. You have people saying things like, finally, someone with the guts to say what we're all thinking.
Yeah.
And then you have others calling her a monster, saying, this is the kind of rhetoric that leads to violence and hate.
Yeah, and it really lays bare. What's particularly interesting is how this story reveals the deep divisions within our society.
Absolutely.
On one side, you have those who see Gomez's statement as a necessary response to a very real problem, illegal immigration and its potential link to crime. They might feel that the current system is too lenient, that it doesn't adequately protect American citizens.
Right. For them, this isn't about hate. It's about safety and security. They're looking for a strong leader who's willing to take a stand, even if it means using extreme language.
Absolutely. They want somebody who's going to, they want action. But on the other side, you have those who see Gomez's rhetoric as dangerous and dehumanizing. They might point to the fact that America itself was built by immigrants, that this kind of language ignores our own history and fuels xenophobia.
Right. They're concerned that this kind of talk will incite violence against immigrants, regardless of their legal status or whether they've committed any crimes.
Yeah, and it's important to note that Gomez's statement didn't happen in a vacuum. It's part of a larger trend in political discourse, particularly on the right, where strong, even inflammatory language is used to appeal to a specific base.
It's like she's tapping into this underlying current of anxiety and fear, using those emotions to gain support and propel her campaign forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And, social media platforms, with their algorithms designed to show us content that aligns with our existing beliefs, create these echo chambers where these extreme viewpoints can flourish. They can make it feel like everyone agrees with us, further reinforcing our own biases.
Right, so you have this perfect storm brewing. A provocative statement, deep societal divisions, and social media algorithms that amplify those divisions.
Exactly. And what we're seeing play out in the reactions to Gomez's post is a microcosm of that larger storm. It's a snapshot of how we as a society are grappling with these complex issues, often in very raw and emotional ways.
And there's another layer to this story that I found particularly fascinating. Some of the comments focus specifically on Gomez's own heritage, right? Questioning whether someone with immigrant roots has the right to advocate for such harsh punishments against other immigrants.
Yes, that's where things get really interesting. This brings us face to face with the complexities of identity and assimilation. How do individuals navigate their own personal histories, especially when those histories clash with their political ambitions?
It's like people are saying, wait a minute, where do you come from?
Yeah.
Do you really have the standing to make these judgments?
Exactly, and it raises these broader questions, about the very nature of belonging. What does it mean to be an American? Can someone who embraces a certain set of political beliefs, even if those beliefs seem to contradict their own heritage, still be considered part of the national fabric?
These are the kinds of questions that really get to the heart of this deep dive. It's not just about immigration policy or political rhetoric. It's about who we are as a nation, what values we hold dear, and how we define ourselves in an increasingly diverse and interconnected world.
And what's really fascinating to me? It all stems from this one social media post, a seemingly insignificant event that has, in its own way, become a catalyst for some very profound reflections.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just incredible.
It really is. So let's dig into some more of these reactions and see what other insights we can uncover.
All right, let's do it. It's a stark reminder that the digital world, for all its connectivity, can also create these echo chambers where nuanced conversations are sacrificed for the sake of virality and outrage.
Yeah, you're right. It's easy to get caught up in the back and forth, the emotional roller coaster of it all. But you brought up something earlier that I think is crucial. This didn't happen in a vacuum. Gomez's statement, as extreme as it is a reflection of a much bigger picture.
Exactly. To really understand what's going on here, we need to zoom out.
Yeah.
To consider the broader historical and political context.
Okay, so help us zoom out. What are some of the historical parallels we should be thinking about?
Well, throughout history, you see these cycles of fear and scapegoating, particularly during times of economic uncertainty or social upheaval. When people feel threatened, when they feel like their way of life is under attack, they often look for someone to blame.
And immigrants, especially those who are undocumented, are often an easy target.
Right? They're perceived as outsiders, as different, as taking something away from those who are already here. And that perception, whether it's accurate or not, can be very powerful.
So how does that historical context play into what we're seeing today with Gomez and her statement?
Well, you can see how she's tapping into those historical anxieties. She's playing on people's fears about crime, about cultural change, about economic insecurity, and she's using that fear to justify her extreme stance on immigration.
It's like she's saying, I understand your fear, and I'm the only one who's willing to do something about it.
Exactly. It's a very effective, albeit dangerous political strategy,
Right.
and it's one that we've seen play out time and time again throughout history.
And then you add in the power of social media, the way it can amplify these messages and create these echo chambers where people are only exposed to information that confirms their existing biases.
It's a recipe for division and polarization, and it's one of the biggest challenges we face in the digital age. How do we have meaningful conversations about complex issues when we're constantly being bombarded with information that's designed to provoke rather than inform?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
So how do we navigate this landscape? How do we as individuals make sense of all this information and engage in more productive conversations?
Well, I think the first step is to recognize that we're all susceptible to these biases. We all have our own preconceived notions and beliefs, and those beliefs are often shaped by our personal experiences or upbringing, the information we're exposed to.
So you're saying we need to be more aware of our own biases.
Absolutely. We need to be willing to question our own assumptions, to consider alternative viewpoints, to be open to the possibility that we might be wrong.
That's easier said than done, especially when we feel strongly about something.
It is, but it's essential if we want to have meaningful conversations about these complex issues.
Okay, so we need to be aware of our biases. What else can we do?
Well, another important step is to be more critical of the information we're consuming. Who's sharing this information? What's their agenda? Are they presenting a balanced perspective?
So you're saying we can't just take everything we see on social media at face value?
Right. We need to be more discerning, more skeptical. We need to be willing to do our own research, to fact check, to seek out diverse perspectives.
That makes sense. But it's also a lot of work, especially when we're already bombarded with so much information.
It is, but it's worth the effort. Because if we don't take the time to critically evaluate the information we're consuming, we risk becoming pawns in someone else's game.
You're right. We don't want to be manipulated by algorithms or by politicians who are exploiting our fears and anxieties for their own gain.
And I think another key element here is the power of empathy. Can we try to understand where the other person is coming from, even if we don't agree with them? Can we acknowledge that their perspective might be shaped by a different set of experiences, a different understanding of the world?
Empathy, that's a big one. It's so easy to dismiss someone who holds a different viewpoint, to label them as wrong or ignorant. But if we can try to see the world through their eyes, even for a moment, it might help us to bridge the divide.
Exactly. And it doesn't mean we have to agree with them, but it does mean that we're willing to listen, to engage in a respectful dialogue, to try to find common ground.
And that kind of dialogue, that willingness to listen and understand, is essential if we want to move forward as a society.
It's the foundation of a healthy democracy. It's what allows us to have these difficult conversations, to debate these complex issues, to find solutions that work for everyone.
So we've talked about being aware of our biases, being critical of the information we're consuming, and practicing empathy. Are there any other tools we can use to navigate this landscape?
Well, I think it's also important to remember that we're not alone in this. There are organizations and individuals who are working to combat misinformation, to promote media literacy, to foster constructive dialogue.
You're talking about groups like fact-checking websites, media literacy organizations, and even just individuals who are committed to having respectful conversations online.
Exactly. And we can all do our part by supporting these efforts, by sharing accurate information, by calling out misinformation when we see it, and by engaging in constructive dialogue online and offline.
So it's not just about being passive consumers of information. We can actively shape the conversation. We can be part of the solution.
Absolutely. We all have a role to play in creating a more informed and engaged citizenry, and that's what will ultimately lead to more effective solutions to these complex challenges.
That's a powerful message. It's not about feeling helpless or overwhelmed by the flood of information. It's about taking control, being critical thinkers, and engaging in a way that moves the conversation forward.
And it all starts with recognizing that this isn't just about one social media post, one politician, or one issue. It's about how we as a society choose to engage with each other, how we choose to navigate this increasingly complex information landscape.
And that's a conversation that needs to happen everywhere, from our social media feeds to our dinner tables to our town hall meetings. As we're exploring these reactions to Valentina Gomez's statement, there's one particular thread that really stood out to me. The responses from Arabic-speaking users on social media were surprisingly diverse.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's like
Tell me more about that.
you had some in that community echoing Gomez's sentiments, saying things like, "She's right, anyone entering illegally should face consequences."
Wow.
Yeah, it seems the desire for strong immigration control, crosses cultural and linguistic lines.
It does, and it's a reminder that these concerns aren't confined to one nationality or political ideology. Many people, regardless of their background, are looking for reassurances in the face of perceived threats, whether economic or cultural.
Right, they want stability, they want security. But then you also saw pushback from others within the Arabic-speaking community. Some even mocking Gomez with comments like, "Look at the land of freedom and democracy, showing its true nature." It highlights the hypocrisy some see in America's stance on immigration, given its own history.
Right. It's a powerful critique, and one that resonates globally. Many see America's historical narrative as being built by immigrants clashing with its current approach to immigration control.
Absolutely. And then there were those who zeroed in on Gomez's heritage, right? Pointing out the irony of someone with immigrant roots advocating for such harsh measures. Comments like, "She forgot her ancestors were Mexican immigrants," really bring that tension to the forefront.
Yeah, and this is where the personal and the political collide. It forces us to consider the complex relationship individuals have with their own heritage, particularly when it intersects with their political aspirations.
Yeah,
It's not always a straightforward narrative.
It's a reminder that these issues are rarely black and white. There are layers of personal history, cultural context, and individual experiences that shape how people view immigration.
Absolutely, and it underscores the fact that immigration itself is a constantly evolving story. It's a global phenomenon with deep historical roots and ongoing repercussions. The reactions from the Arabic-speaking community demonstrate how this story transcends national boundaries and touches on universal themes of belonging, identity, and the search for a better life.
It's so true. It's a human story. It's not just an American story. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the most important thing you think our listeners should take away from all of this?
I think the key takeaway is this. We need to move beyond the simplistic narratives, the sound bites, the knee-jerk reactions. Immigration is a complex issue with deep historical roots and far-reaching consequences.
We can't just reduce it to a hashtag or a political slogan.
Right, exactly.
We can't afford to get bogged down in the outrage cycle, the constant back and forth on social media. We need to engage with these issues on a deeper level.
We need to be informed. We need to be critical thinkers. And most importantly, we need to be willing to listen to each other even when we disagree.
That's a great note to end on. This deep dive has shown us that even a single social media post can spark a conversation that touches on some of the most pressing issues of our time.
It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in shaping that conversation, in moving it towards understanding and constructive dialogue.
So to our listeners, keep exploring these issues, keep asking questions, and keep engaging in thoughtful ways. These are conversations that matter, and your voice is an important part of them.